TV special immigration talk show with attorney Ms. Prashanti Reddy. So without any further delay, let us welcome Ms. Reddy onto our show. Prashanti Reddy Garu, welcome back, Andy. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing great, Prashanti Reddy Garu. So, Ms. Reddy, today we decided that we're actually going to be covering a pretty new topic, a very different topic. We hardly covered it in the last couple of shows. So, today we'll be talking a little about the B2 visa. So, do you want to get into the B2 visa directly, or do you have any latest immigration updates that you want to cover up?
No, we can go with the questions directly and take it from there.
Yes. So, Ms. Reddy, just let's start with the formal introduction of what exactly is this B2 visa and who are actually applicable for these kind of visas and what are the advantages of it. So, maybe first explain the basics and then we can go in detail.
So the B visa is for visitors for pleasure or visitors for business. So the B1 is for business, and the B2 visa is visiting the United States for pleasure. Under the visitors for pleasure, which is the B2 visa, we have several reasons upon which you can come. So you could come for tourism. Under the B2 visa, you can come to visit your family. You could also come for medical reasons. So if you need some surgery done or some other medical, you need to meet with a physician here or something else, you can come to do that on a B2. A lot of people, for example, come to New York to Sloan Catering to get their cancer treatment, and they come on a B2 visa. So, that's just an example, but it's a good example of how you would use your B2 visa for medical treatment. You could also come on a B2 for participating in a social or religious activity. Could be social activity, could be, for example, attending ATA, which is American Telugu Association conference, right? Attending that could be a good example of how you would use your B2 visa to attend a social or community activity. You could also be attending a religious conference. There's a Buddhist conference organized in New York recently, so you could have been attending that. Also, you can use the B2 if you are a dependent of a person who is part of the U.S. Armed Forces. You could be a dependent of a crewman, person who's on a ship. You could be coming on a B2 to undergo a short course of study. Usually for study, we would use an F1. But if the applicant is coming to the United States, primarily for tourism, but is also incidentally will engage in a short course of study during their visit, then it's possible that they can give you a B2 instead of requiring an I-20 and giving you an F1. Also, amateur entertainers and athletes, like if you're coming to perform and you're not charging for the performance, then that could be, you could come in on a B2 for that. Or if you're an amateur athlete coming to participate in some kind of a sports event, you could use a B2 for that as well. Travel to give birth in the United States. So this, you have to be very careful to use this because some people just travel so that they can have US citizens children by giving birth in the US. So the at the port of entry, the officers are advised that if the person is coming solely to simply give birth in the US, then they should not be allowed in on a B2. But if their primary purpose is not to give birth, but maybe for medical reasons, they need to, admit themselves into a hospital in the US and give birth here. Their doctor is here, something of that nature, then, the person does qualify to get a B2 visa for these purposes. But, it's very important that they should, specify that they're coming for medical treatment or coming for tourism, but not just to give birth in the US. So purpose of travel is very important when, is an important determination when giving this kind of a visa for a person who's pregnant and wants to give birth in the US. There are also some special circumstances under which a person can be given a visitor's visa. So a fiance of a US citizen or lawful permanent resident, surprisingly, can get B2 visa, provided that they're able to show that they have no intention of immediately immigrating to the US. So they're simply going to get married and go back. Maybe the permanent resident is planning to live abroad, or the US citizen is planning to live abroad, and they simply need to come here for the marriage. Then under, in those circumstances, they will allow you to travel on a B2, right? So to become engaged, to plan the wedding, or something like that. Uh, also, if you're the fiance of a non-immigrant, if you're a fiance of a person who is on a H or F, or L or M, P or Q visa, a non-immigrant petition, such as a H-1B work visa, then it's possible that you could be coming here to get married. But you have to, as long as, again, for any of these, you have to show that you have no intention to remain here permanently in the US. As long as you're able to show that, the regulations 9 FAM 4.2.2 say that you can obtain a visitor's visa for this purpose. Also, in some instances where a proxy marriage takes place, in order to consummate the marriage, you can then come to the US for that purpose, as long as, again, you show you have no intention of immigrating. The spouse or child of a US citizen can also come using this. So, for example, an adopted child or a spouse or child of a US citizen may be given a visitor's visa if the purpose of the travel is just to come temporarily to visit. Because they can also file for an immigrant visa, but if they don't want to and they just want to visit temporarily, then they can most certainly use the B2 visa, as long as they're able to show that they have no intention to immigrate. Usually, if you're married to a US citizen or a permanent resident, it's more difficult to show that you have no intention to immigrate, especially if your spouse or partner or immediate relative is living in the US. Also, in some instances where some extended family members can come and visit if they're not eligible for derivative status. So, for example, if you are not yet married, but you're in a relationship, then you can definitely come and visit your non-immigrant partner here. So, somebody who's on a H, instead of coming, I mean, if you were married, you would come on a H4, but if you are not married, then you would, be able to come possibly on a B2, as long as, again, you're able to show you don't have the intention of immigrating. Extended family members cannot come on a H4 or an L2 or other derivative status, such as a parent. So they would most certainly come on a B2. And some other categories, which I am going to skip, but they're also, in addition to the visitor's visa, we also have the business visa, which is the B1. And, there are many reasons that you can come on a B1, but mainly, the applicant should be traveling to the United States to engage in commercial transactions, negotiations, consultations, conferences, etc. So to engage in commercial transactions, negotiate contracts, consult with a business associate. Maybe you have a lawsuit that you want to file or that you're part of. So to litigate, you can come as well. Or to participate in any conferences, conventions, or to maybe undertake some kind of a research, as long as you're not getting paid in the US. And we already talked about traveling, to give birth in the United States. So that's another reason you could come on a B as well. So there can also be other instances where you are coming to the US to pursue your employment. So it's incidental to your work. You can come on a B1 as long as you're not getting paid in the US. So again, through your company, if you're coming to negotiate your contracts, maybe to meet a client. Also, it can be, religious leaders and members of religious denominations or groups that are coming to the engage to maybe coming to the US to engage in maybe a religious tour. Visit all the temples. Religious leaders maybe coming in to take up some kind of a position of a priest or a temporary position. So some of these things we can also use the B1 as long as we're able to show that it's temporary. Also, if you're participating in some kind of a voluntary service, so you could be participating for a non-profit and in some kind of some kind of a charitable organization and coming to the US to fulfill the requirements of that charitable organization. So it's important to note that usually at the port of entry, they will ask for the name, the place, address, of this voluntary organization. They will ask information about that voluntary organization that you are representing. Of course, if you are a member of the board of directors of a US company, you can come on a B1 based on that. Also, if you're a professional athlete, as long as you don't receive any payment in the US, you can certainly come on a B1. Otherwise, you'll have to get some kind of a work visa, like an O, to come to the US if you're getting paid in the US. So if, for example, you're a professional golfer and you say don't get any other payment other than maybe the prize money, if you win a tournament, then it's possible to come on that basis. Then you have, of course, crew members that come. Usually they come on a C, but they can also come on a B1 as well. Also, so those are some of the, I think, B1 related activities, business visa related activities. There also, you can come on a B1 if you're a employee or domestic worker of an individual who is a US citizen. You could come on a B1, though you have to be careful because usually they don't give these B1 visas, but it's possible. So personal employees or domestic workers may accompany or follow to join a US citizen who is traveling to the United States temporarily if the US citizen has a permanent home abroad. So the US citizen usually lives abroad but is coming to visit the US and brings their nurse along with them, for example, or maybe babysitter if they have children, then that person can certainly come on a B1 as well.
Yeah. And Ms. Reddy, so you were saying something?
No, I'm just continuing the list, but if you have questions, I can do that later.
So maybe you can just continue the list, and I think once the list is done, we can talk about the duration and how long, these kind of people can live in the country, and are there any limitations for it?
So, in addition to, yeah, we'll certainly talk about that. You can ask that question maybe once I'm finished.
Yes.
So in addition to that, there are some special circumstances under which permanent residents also can enter the US on a B1 instead of entering as a green card holder. Exactly. Especially when, the conditional permanent residents, they filled out a particular form, but they need that to actually enter the US. In the meantime, they want to enter urgently. They can certainly enter on a B1 and still protect their permanent resident status. So it's interesting to note. And of course, you have other people like airline employees, etc., who can come on that status. Also, there are other situations in which B2 can come to the US. Situations. So usually you were asking the question, right, as to how long can a person who has a B2 visa stay in the US. Usually they can only stay for 6 months maximum, and then they can file an extension. Initially, they're given for 6 months, and then they file an extension for an additional 6 months, so a total of 1 year. But in some special circumstances, such as extended family members, household members of non-immigrants. For example, if I was on a H1 and my parents wanted to visit me, it's possible that if you ask at the port of entry that they give you entry for 1 year. Instead of giving you entry for 6 months, then you file for an additional 6 months. This is a special condition for cohabiting partners or extended family members or household members that are not eligible for derivative status. So those who are eligible for derivative status, such as H4 or L2, or for an F1, it's F2, are spouses and children. But if you're not a spouse or a child, but you're still part of the family member, like you may be a parent, then it's possible then you can get, you'll be allowed to stay for 1 year, and then you can keep applying for extensions in increments of up to 6 months. This is a complete break from the usual rules for a B2 visa or for B2 status, which is always for 6 months. A B1, on the other hand, is usually given for 3 months, but you can keep applying for extensions. And you can stay only for a period of 1 year. So the exception exists only for cohabiting partners and extended family members, household members who are not eligible for derivative status. They can stay for longer periods on a B2 visa. Now you can
Yes.
ask me questions if you have any.
Yes. So, Ms. Reddy, my next question is, so can one actually work here with a B2 or a B2 visa, whoever is on B2 visa, or is it always that, you just mentioned earlier that only people who are kind of doing a charitable or, a show, so whatever you said, people who are coming to these kind of associations and, working for free, only they can have B2. So you are telling that nobody, so whoever has B2, they can't really earn anything in the USA?
So then there's first of all a distinction between B1 and B2. So all that applies to B1, who's a business visa holder. So when they give you a visa, they'll give you a B1, B2, so you can use it for whatever you want. But at the port of entry, when you're entering into the country, depending on what you say to the officer, they'll give you an I-94 for either a B1, which is for business if you're traveling for business, or they'll give you a B2 if you're traveling for pleasure. In the circumstances that you just mentioned, you cannot work on a business visa, but you can certainly travel for work, which means that as long as you're not getting any kind of remuneration in the US, you can certainly travel for the sake of your business or for the sake of your employer, to meet clients, to negotiate, to attend conferences, to give demonstrations. These kind of things are to attend, if you're a part of the board, if you're a board member in your company, then to attend board meetings. All this is activities are certainly possible, but there can be no remuneration.
Of course. Ms. Reddy, can someone actually sponsor B2 visa, or is it just something that only B1 or someone with H1 can do it?
So nobody needs to sponsor a person who wants a B2 visa, but you have to show that you have the intention not to immigrate, and you have to show that you have enough finances to support yourself, and you have to show that you plan to come back. You have ties to your country.
Yeah.
If you're visiting someone, then it's appropriate for them to fill out an affidavit of support and say that they'll sponsor your stay while you're here. They'll take care of your, food and boarding, etc. So that helps with getting a visa, but it's not absolutely necessary. You can be self-funded as well.
Yes. Miss Reddy, my next question is: can one extend that B2 visa? Like you said, there are some have this limitations that can only be for 6 months. So, can they usually extend it, or they for extension they have to get back to their own country and then again come back? Is that like a long process that happens?
So when you're first given an I-94, they'll give it to you based on what you tell them at the port of entry. Usually, if you're applying for a business visa, they'll give you 1 month to 3 months. And if you're applying for a visitor for pleasure or to travel, they'll usually give you based on what you ask. Again, they'll ask you how long you plan to stay, and if you say 5 months, they'll give it to you for 6 months. So they'll give it to you for a maximum of up to 6 months. And if you say I only want to stay for 1 month, they might just give it for 1 month. If you
Got
want to say, I'm staying for 2 months, so they give it in increments of 1, 3, and 6, based on what your requirements are. And before that period is over, you should file an I-539. So it's an extension that you have to file, and the form is called I-539. Nowadays, you can file that form online as well on the USCIS website.
Got
And
it.
you can pay online, etc. So it's become very easy to file an I-539 extension. It's key to remember that you have to file it before your I-94 expires, and also key to remember that if you're asking for 6 months, even if you don't get a response on that B2 extension, you should leave within that 6 months, because sometimes it takes more than 6 months for them to respond. And if you stay beyond that period, then you're violating your status. So always leave before the time period that you have requested on your B2 extension.
Got it. Ms. Reddy, I think this will be the most common question that comes in everybody's head. Is that can one change their B2 visa to any other visas in the US? Is there any chance that they can change it when they're staying there?
Yeah, so when you are on a B2 visa, you can file a change of status to any other petition. Usually, if you're filing a change of status to an immigrant petition, meaning that if you get married while you're on a B2 visa in the US, and you file for a green card, then usually you want to wait for 90 days to do this, because you want to show that at the time of entry into the US, you had no intention of immigrating to the US, right? Because that's always something that they're looking for at each entry, whether you misrepresented at the time of entry, whether it's a lawful entry or it's not a lawful entry. So usually if you wait for 90 days and file your immigrant petition, you should be okay, but that really depends on the discretion of the officer that's looking at your green card petition. But you can certainly file in the same way for a change of status to another non-immigrant petition, such as a H1 or an F1, a student visa, right? Or maybe your spouse got a H1, you can file for a derivative status to a H4. So yes, you can file for a change of status, but there are certain things to keep in mind.
Got it. And I think with that, we can conclude today's episode, Ms. Reddy. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's always lovely to have you. Thank you for the viewers for tuning in. You're watching Sakshi TV with me, Shivani Raj.
Don't forget to subscribe to our videos if you like what you see. Also, give us a thumbs up and share the video with your family and friends. Thank you.